بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. Tonight's lesson will be starting a new book, a new chapter from Marjan, which is Kitab al-Itq, the book of Manumission. We finished Nikah, Rida, Talaq, Li'an, and now we're moving forward to Al-Itq. And inshallah ta'ala, this is a relatively small chapter. We'll then move forward to Kitab al-Buyu' bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Alhamdulillah. Before we get started, a friendly reminder to everyone, the brothers and the sisters who ask different questions with regards to contacting us, reaching out to us, the different classes, structured classes that we have, and the list of services that we provide. Inshallah ta'ala, you can check us out on HadithDisciple shop.com. And for the brothers and the sisters here, you can scan this QR code with your phone, and it will take you directly to the page or pages where you can find those classes, lessons, lectures, and seminars, and the different online virtual services. From them, counseling, nikah services, tutoring, and premarital counseling. All right? Very briefly, if anybody wants to scan the QR code, here you are, inshallah ta'ala. The other day, I think it was last week, I had an online nikah service, and subhanallah, you'll never guess where these people were contacting me from. They were located in Palestine. They weren't people living in the United States. They were Palestinian, no English or Arabic. And the sister who contacted us, because you may ask yourself, why would they want you to perform an online nikah and they're living across over the water in Palestine? Scholars there, masjids there, courts there, so on and so forth. So the sister said that this is what she said now, things are so difficult for the Muslims in her city living in Palestine, and that the Israelis make things so troublesome for them to go to the masjid, for them to get married. If someone wants to accept Islam, whether he was Jewish or Israeli or whatever else, Christian, he wants to become a Muslim, they make things very, 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 very difficult. And the sister had been following us in our classes for a very long time. She wanted to get married with the permission and blessing of her family. And her to-be husband, the groom, was actually at the time, if I'm not mistaken, he was an Arab Christian. And he wanted to marry her, and he wanted to be a Muslim. So he wanted to take his shahada, and he wanted to get married. And she said that it was very difficult there. So therefore, just think about that now, subhanAllah. And think about the dunya post-COVID, and what the dunya has become post-COVID. And alhamdulillah, not to toot our own horns or to brag or to boast, but the importance and the virtue of these online services. Making things easy and simple for people that don't have the ability to do the traditional orthodox person-to-person counseling, marriage, divorce, studying, or whatever the case may be. And there are many, many, many stories like this. Times in which I myself was humbled tremendously and shocked at the nature and type of people that reached out to me and contacted me through those different platforms and websites. Okay, so HadithDiscipleShop.com, we can check out a full list of our Islamic services that we provide for the Muslims virtually, long distance, from the ease and convenience of your own home, whatever need you may have. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. So tonight's chapter, the author says, rahimahullah, Kitab al-Itq. Hadith Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma anna Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam qala من أعتق شركا له في عبد فكان له مال يبلغ ثمن العبد قوم العبد قيمة عدل فأعطى شركاءه حصصهم وعتق عليه ولا فقد عتق منه ما عتق. باب ذكر سعاية العبد. حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال من أعتق شقيصا من مملوكه فعليه خلاصه في ماله فإن لم يكن له مال قوم مملوك قيمة عدل ثم استصعي غير مشقوق عليه. So the first chapter says Kitab al-Itq, and it doesn't mention a bab, but it just says Kitab al-Itq without a specific bab, okay? Without a special chapter heading. Stay with me now. That's Hadith 958, then Hadith 959. Let's move forward, inshallah ta'ala, to the end of the book, which is the 5th chapter, that states Babu Fadl al-Itqi. اقرأ أيما رجل الحديث الأخير في الباب أيما رجل حديث أبي هريرة.
حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أيما رجل أعتق امرأ مسلما استنقذ الله بكل عضوا منه من النار.
عيد.
أيما الرجل
حديث أبي هريرة.
حديث أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أيما رجل أعتق امرأ مسلما استنقذ الله بكل عضوا منه من النار.
جزاك الله خيرا. The last chapter says the superiority of manumission. Hadith 964 is narrated Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever manumits a Muslim slave, that's what it says in translation, Allah will save all the parts of his body from the fire as he has manumitted the body parts of the slave. So perhaps, inshallah ta'ala, with the explanation, we'll start off with that last chapter. Why is that the last chapter, not the first? The virtue, before we get into the rulings, we won't discuss that right now. What's important is, as we've explained many times in many classes before, slavery is a very long and momentous discussion. There lies no doubt that slavery and the history of the human being is a long and epic saga. One may say, and Allah knows best, that slavery has been around perhaps since as long as the human beings have been around. And if not that early, slavery goes way back, regardless of the race, the nation, and the religion. Everyone understand this? And of course, like many things in history that are painful, that are difficult to discuss, that are politically incorrect today in light of today's world, that are unpleasant discussions and topics, many people are on different levels and sides of extremism. Extreme in hating the thing, rejecting the thing, extreme in accepting the thing, affirming the thing. Many people are incorrect, and they have a great deal of misconceptions regarding these topics and these discussions that are tough and difficult. There are those who are mistakenly mistaken, and then there are those who intentionally lie, hide facts, put forth shameful and shameless propaganda to suit one agenda or another. And there lies no doubt that for sure is slavery. There are those who go extreme and rejecting it. No, it's not true. It didn't happen. There's no such thing as slavery here. It wasn't in this country. No, it didn't exist. No, it's exaggerated. No, that's not true. No. And then there are those who go on the other side of extremism, affirming everything with regards to slavery. And everything's based off of slavery. And this and that and so on and so forth. And then there are a few people who have the proper intelligence and the mental capacity and the integrity when it comes to studying history to be fair, to be honest, to be impartial, and to be objective, and only deal with the facts versus partial facts, let alone lies and agendified versions and stories. Everybody clear on that so far? So we don't want to get into all of the details here with regards to slavery. What's important is this is a chapter in Al-Islam, a chapter in this book, so obviously slavery, to one extent or another, on one level or another, is accepted and permissible in Islam, if there are rulings on it. What does Islam say about slavery? Having a slave, purchasing a slave, selling a slave, freeing a slave, manumitting a slave, a runaway slave, having relationships with a concubine slave. What does Islam say about capturing a free person and making him a slave, etc., etc., etc.? Everybody understand this? And from the lies that people have and the misconceptions that people have regarding slavery, especially if you are born and raised in America, is that you're taught in school that slavery is just an American problem. Or you're taught in school that slavery is just a Southern problem. Or you're taught in school that slavery is just a black-white problem. You're taught this. Or, if you go a little above and beyond that, in some books, I remember as a young child reading this in certain books, not in school, but in my house. They'll talk about slavery starting off with Arabs. Arabs beginning the slave trade, capturing slaves, sub-Saharan slaves, the Horn of Africa, so on and so forth. But when you read more books, you study, you watch more documentaries, you realize that there have been nations way before Columbus and the Spanish and the Portuguese and the Americas, way before Arabia and this century and that century, that practiced the institution of slavery. Ancient. Everyone understand this? Why wasn't that mentioned in the book? Why didn't they talk about the European slaves, the European slave trade, and the Baltic and Bohemia, Spartans, the Romans, the gladiators, the serfs of Russia? Why didn't that come up? What's important is people, they mention what they want when it comes to slavery. In my humble opinion, another lie, or for sure a major misconception that people have taught and promoted with regards to slavery is they try to turn it into an issue of color, which isn't necessarily true initially. Rather, I think it's safe to say is that history has more to do with caste and level than actual race and pigmentation of the skin. All right? But that's a long discussion. Another misconception is people, for sure, they become very extremely emotional when it comes to slavery. And it's painful for many people, not just black people. Like we said, serfdom in Russia, okay? And other types of slaves in other parts of Europe, and other parts of China and Japan, and around the world, okay? The indigenous people called Native Americans in this country, many of them had slaves. It's a known fact. And many tribes and clans, they were warlike. Whether they were the Comanche or the Apache or this tribe, that they were warriors, they were fighters. They weren't just peaceful Indians sitting around smoking a pipe and a teepee, as people try to make it seem. And that the white man came to this country, killing, shooting, and then that was it. They were warriors, proud warriors. And obviously, whenever there's a war, people are going to be killed. And a large number of soldiers and combatants, let alone civilians, are going to be what? Captured. All right? That's another discussion. You get the point I'm trying to make? What's important is people become so emotional when it comes to slavery is that they lose their objectivity. And one of the major points of objectivity of slavery is money and profit. Okay? It's not about we want to enslave this race and these people, but it's about profit. And the proof for that is, according to this theory and that theory, once these people that were enslaved and captured did not survive, did not exist, could not deal with that labor, they had to find a what? An alternative. So if it was about just enslaving this race and these people, why would they do that first? Get the point? It's about what? Profit. Maximum profit. Making as much money from these fields or these mines or bearing as many children or whatever other type of profit that human being who is the master wants. I would understand this. So many people, when they study history and they talk about slavery, they lose their objectivity. And they get into emotion and thought and feeling versus the practicality of slavery. I would understand this. And this is very important with regards to making sense out of many of the tragic things that happen in history when it comes to slavery. Tragedy. And it shows you the greed of man. And how money blinds man. And how money takes a man and a human being away from his humanity when the lust of wealth is placed in front of him. And then, if you look at history, you're going to see that these different justifications and explanations, religious, cultural, scientific, they were brought after the prophet. The reason why slavery is not immoral and it is okay is because of this scientific proof regards to this race and that race. And because God Almighty has mandated it. And the children of Noah, so you get the point? Those things came after the guilt and after the shame, and after the tragedy and the massacres and the lack of humanity. And they had to have something to console their minds and their conscience. The reason why it's okay is because it's in the Bible. The reason why slavery is all right and what we're doing, kidnapping people, castrating people, is because of the Quran, so on and so forth. You get the point? But in actuality, that was never the what? The initial objective. The initial objective was what? Profit. Everybody clearing this or not? All right? So that's very important, okay? So therefore, when a person studies the long, painful, tragic, unbelievable history of slavery throughout the world, from east to west, north to south, there were different types of slaves. There were different reasons behind a person being a slave. There are different ways of manumission. There are different punishments, different violations of basic humanity when it comes to slaves. And there are different relationships that different people had with their slaves. And it's wrong for everyone to broad brush every type of slave, slaver, slavery, manumission into one pot and stew it all together. Historically, that's wrong. And you're going to end up belying facts, denying facts, rejecting authentic information because of emotion and because of agenda. Everybody understand this or not? Now, when we talk about Islam and people attacking Islam and saying that Islam is a brutal religion, Islam is a racist religion that gives superiority to the Arab over the African, or the Arab over the Persian, or whatever the case may be, so on and so forth. The first step is you have to speak to the one who's criticizing Islam and the Muslims. If the person is an atheist, they have no faith, or an agnostic or something like this, a non-orthodox, unorthodox type of faith or religion, then that's an easier discussion to have. But if someone is claiming, like most people, a Christian, regardless of whatever type of Christian they are, Catholic, Evangelist, Baptist, then obviously the first step is you have to pump the brakes. Why are you attacking Islam? Something that Islam is exclusive to Islam, or something that is found in your holy sacred book as well? Which of the two? Because if you want to talk about slavery being bad and God, then I don't think you need to open up a book besides the New Testament, let alone the Old Testament. And one of the major arguments that the people in the South, the southern states of the United States, made against the Northerners and those who with the abolitionist movement, one of their main arguments was abolition of slavery goes against the will of God. And it goes against Christianity. And the proof for that is that slavery was clearly affirmed in the Old Testament. Abraham had slaves. This prophet had slaves, hundreds of slaves. And in the Second Testament, it was never what? Abolished. It was never what? It was never abolished. So you claiming to be a Christian, how are you saying that it's wrong, it's oppressive, it's immoral, it's against? When it states in our holy book, there's what? Everybody understand this? Okay. Another misconception with regards to slavery and the argument, what does God want? Does God allow slavery, encourage slavery, support slavery, so on and so forth, is the lie and the fallacy that the Union Army and the northern states fought the Civil War just to manumit the southern slaves. That's a lie. That's not true. They did not kill each other, die, suffer, spend millions of dollars just to emancipate slaves. That's a lie. Okay, there are other reasons behind the war. Was slavery a part of it? Yes, it was. The continuation of slavery to the West, from sea to shining sea. The average American, and Allah knows best, they probably don't even know that during that time, the early or the second half of the 19th century, there were 50 states. America was not what it is now, what it was then. California, right? Texas, Mexico, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, all of those states, they were a part of what? Mexico. But their frontier was expanding, manifest destiny, from sea to what? Shining sea, coast to coast. The East Coast, 13 colonies, all that was done. New York, Baltimore, Boston, that's finished, that's done. But the wild, wild west, the frontier, and expanding the frontier of the United States and moving slave labor into those states. Everybody understand this? Let alone you'll be shocked. And it shows you the shameless propaganda of the media, of school, of college, of high school. Abraham Lincoln is looked at as being a hero and a champion for civil rights and for black people. Have you ever read the political debates that he had? You ever read the political debates? You ever heard of them? And you'd be shocked what he said about black people and about slaves. And what was his original plan to do with those black slaves in the South. He was not a champion for civil rights. Just like Mohandas Gandhi, one of the greatest lies told, was not a champion for civil rights. He was a champion for Indian people. And he had a great deal of disdain and scorn for other races, specifically blacks. But they just promote him like this, champion for all people. That's a lie. That's not true. He did not support other races. He was against the British for the Indians. End of what? Discussion. Everybody understand that? So there are many lies that your teachers have told you over the years pertaining to slavery, pertaining to wars, and pertaining to manumission and the Emancipation Proclamation, so on and so forth. You guys get the point I'm trying to make? So if you want to talk about slavery, then you have to talk about it transparently, openly. You have to be just. You have to be fair. And you have to deal with facts and nothing what? More. Islam, as Allah tells us in the Quran, إِنَّ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ يَهْدِي لِلَّتِي هِيَ أَقْوَمُ, that this Quran guides to the straightest of paths. So if and when there is slavery in Islam, then that system and that set of laws is going to be the fairest, kindest, most merciful, most detailed system that you'll find. Everyone understand this? Which protects and supports the rights of the enslaved and the one who owns those slaves or who's manumitting those slaves. Khairan, inshallah ta'ala. As I said before, it's a long discussion. In this country, outside of this country, in Islam, outside of Islam, different liberal Muslims, modern Muslims, people who want to be modern, they want to be accepted by the non-Muslims. They talk about slavery, they talk about civil rights. And of course, they're going to be flabbergasted when a non-Muslim opens up the Quran. And when a non-Muslim opens up Sahih Bukhari. And when the non-Muslims talk about the Barbary Coast. And the North African pirates that were predominantly Muslim, that captured hundreds, if not thousands, of free people and made them slaves. Or the transportation of sub-Saharan African slaves to the coasts, in which thousands of them died, in which 9 out of 10 African children that were castrated bled to death. So you can't give dawah being an apologetic Muslim. You can't give dawah talking about something Islam is against a thing, and then you leave a way for your enemy to attack you and to show that you're contradictory. You guys get the point I'm trying to make? And it's better and it's safer to be open about it than to hide facts and try to be politically correct. As we've said before, oftentimes retreat costs more in men and material than the bloodiest of battles. Sometimes it's best to just stay and fight instead of retreating and running. Everyone understand this? You can cut your losses by fighting instead of tucking your tail. Everyone understand this? So a person comes and asks an uncomfortable question. Did the Prophet marry a 9-year-old girl? Does Islam allow slavery? Is there killing in Islam? Is there this? Is there that? Instead of, oh, no, trying to reform Islam. Instead of saying, yes, but these are the details. Here's the explanation. You may not agree with all of it, but I'm sure you'll be able to see some points. I'm sure you'll see differences between slavery in Islam versus the slavery in the other religions and the other parts of the world. Everybody get the point I'm trying to make? So don't ever be an apologetic person. It will work with some people, maybe the average person, but there are many Christians out there who give dawah that will come for you. And they will prove to you that you're not honest, you're just honest. And if you are honest, you yourself don't know your Islam. And that's going to be very embarrassing, excuse my French or my figure of speech, when someone lifts up your dress, as they say, when someone exposes you, versus dealing with the difficult discussion, the difficult topic, and then navigating through it. You guys get the point I'm trying to make? Let the truth set you what? Free. And you don't have to apologize. It is what it is. If Allah wants this person's guidance, they'll be guided. Last thing I will say, with regards to non-Muslims who attack Islam and attack Muslims because of slavery or fighting and so on and so forth, they're basing their attacks and their criticisms on the modern reformed world. And the modern reformed world, to a large extent, as we've just explained, is pretty much godless and unlike Christ. The modern world in which you live, in which you work, you make this money, you save this money, your 401k, men and women, so on and so forth, isn't based off of the teachings of Christianity. So if you wanted to talk about how Islam could never work for the West, Islam would never work for the West. The Sharia would never work for the West. Neither would Christianity. Democracy for sure is working for the West. Because democracy isn't what? The way of what? Christ. You understand? The world in which you live, you're dealing with this reform, this protest, this revolution. These people stood up for their fights, and it had nothing to do with religion. Everybody understand this? The paycheck that you're making is not based off of Christianity. Women being in a church isn't based off of what? Christianity. Everybody clear on this? Rather, there were times in which people who were slaves or freed slaves had more rights than women of the quoted superior race. You understand this? We're talking about feminism now. You get the point I'm trying to make? In which you are a free white woman, you had less rights than this one or that one. So you're not living in a Christian world. Rather, you're living in a reformed, godless, free world that's based off of countless reforms and revolutions. Workers' reform. Everybody clear on this or not? So you have to understand how to use these tools and weapons. For argument's sake, you're right, Islam's not good for the West, neither is Catholicism. Next, I'll debate with the atheists. The one who claims that Western society is best for people who have no religion. You can debate with that person, you can argue with that person, but you can't debate with someone who calls himself Baptist, call himself Catholic. Because the Catholic Church wouldn't allow 9 out of 10 things that happen on a daily basis in the United States. You guys get the point I'm trying to make? All right, so you got to learn how to cut through the falsehood. And Allah clearly tells us is that the truth, بَلْ نَقْذِفُ بِالْحَقِّ, we hurl the truth, we throw it. It collides with the batil, right? And it knocks the dimagh, فَيَدْمُغُ, it knocks the brains out of the batil. A head-on-head collision, right? A concussion in football. You run into somebody, bang, he's knocked out. His head is spinning. He doesn't know where he is. That's what the haqq does to falsehood. But who is hurling that haqq? What's your velocity? How hard are you throwing it? How good are you? And you're teaching and you're debating and you're arguing, right? So the velocity is very important. The strength, your weight mass is very what? Important in football, right? When you run up and you hit, bang, boom, you hit somebody, all of those things, speed, balance, posture, your shoulder being down, all of those things are important to knock the brains out of somebody, right? So if you're going to give dawah, and if you're going to debate, and if you're going to argue with people, you got to sharpen up. Reading, studying, memorizing, techniques and tactics of debate and argument, so on and so on and so forth. You can't be weak, right? And amateuristic strategy is a cause of injury. Amateuristic strategy is a cause of great injury. Picking up that sword you have no business picking up. You're going to get cut. You're going to hurt somebody. You're going to harm somebody. Don't pick up the sword unless you've trained with a wooden sword for a very long time. And once you've trained with a wooden sword for a very long time, you've trained with a dull steel sword for a long time. And years of study and sparring and practice, then you pick up a live blade. And you spar with a live blade. Then you go to the actual duel or battlefield with a live blade. After years of study and years of mastering your technique. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surely knows best. Okay, so the 5th chapter says, in the Sharh al-Nawawi, and then we'll come back bidnillahi ta'ala to the beginning of the chapter. باب فضل العتق اقرأ. قال يجزي أو يجزي بفتح أوله أي يكافئه بإحسانه وقضاء حقه. ليس عندك؟ طيب المهم طيب خير لا بأس we'll go to the beginning of the chapter. It's fine. It's no problem. So hadith number 958 states, narrated Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhuma, Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, whoever manumits his share of a jointly possessed slave and he has sufficient money to manumit him completely should let its price be estimated by a just man and give his partners the price of their shares and manumit the slave. Otherwise, he manumits the slave partially. So this chapter or this hadith is dealing with a slave, and for argument's sake, the slave doesn't have one master, but there are three: a father and his two sons, a man, a wife, and his daughter, three business partners, a cheap slave or a very costly slave that has talent and skill, a slave that is highly beloved to its owner, and the slave is very expensive. So for argument's sake, there are three people who own this slave. One man wants to manumit the slave. And once again, it shows the encouragement of Islam to do what? To manumit the slave. Naam? To manumit the slave. So therefore, since Islam has encouraged manumission so much, the slave should be free with the condition that one of the three owners will pay off the 2/3 of the remaining two owners. So they're not losing their money. How is it fair for the slave to be free, but I'm losing money? I understand you want your freedom. I understand you're tired of being a slave. But what does that have to do with my financial loss? I would understand this. And in my humble opinion, not to go off to the script, I think this is another major failure. Another major failure of the U.S. government with regards to the abolitionist movement and the Underground Railroad and people from the North or in the South aiding slaves to leave the South to go to the North. And it opens up the door for the Southerners, the planter class, and those under the planter class to say, we are losing money. Our slaves are running away. I had to pay for them, house them, feed them, so on and so forth. Who's going to work my farm? He runs away and he goes to Boston or Philadelphia or New York or Canada. Are you paying me the money that I lost? Was that a mandate? Was that a law? Were they offered money? Did they go to them? Listen, we will pay for your slaves. No, I don't want your money. I want to keep my slaves. No doubt. But was the offer made? Were there concessions made? Free your slaves. Get rid of them. Let them go and you will be compensated for your loss. It wasn't, right? So that's automatically opening up the door for spite and animosity. You guys get the point or not? It's leaving the door open for them to say, these slaves ran from my plantation to your free north. You allow them to stay there as fugitives. We lose money. Why are my financial losses being considered? You guys on the same page or not? You guys with me? And the same applies to the Civil War, and the same applies to slaves being manumitted post or the concept of any slave that escaped and fought in the Union Army would receive his freedom. You're asking for those people to rear their fangs when they catch a soldier, when they catch a captive, taking it out on the poor, helpless, weak people. Your brother ran away, you must feel the wrath of him running away. Everyone understand this? After the war was over, the slaves were freed in this country. What real life systems were put in place to protect the rights of those slaves? Sharecroppers. You guys get the point? Were those rules enforced? You guys get the point? It's like a setup for further failure. For sure, the losers of the war, who have thousands dead, thousands wounded, missing legs, missing eyes, missing feet, all of their society, their civilization destroyed and trampled upon by the godless Northerners. That's a ticket for them to take out their frustrations against who? They're not slaves anymore. You guys get the point? Hence Jim Crow, hence Ku Klux Klan, hence. You get the point? You can't just say you're free and don't have an option afterwards. You guys get the point? Like many people that come to Islam, you call them to Islam. What programs do you have set up once they become Muslim? As if you're setting it up for, they come to Islam, it's frustrating, I gotta learn this, I gotta memorize this, this person doesn't want to help me, he can't speak to me because I'm from a different race, so therefore I'm gonna go what? Back to kufr. You guys get the point? You can't set somebody up for failure. That's the moral of the story. So therefore, this hadith teaches us, one man wants the slave to be free, that's encouraged. But he has to do what now? He has to prevent any loss and spite. Versus the slave is automatically free because one of the partners freed him. The remaining two masters or owners are going to beat him and whip him and work him to death. They're going to try to oppress him and abuse him because they lost money, you're free, we lost our wealth. Versus the person who wants the slave to be free has to take on the responsibility of paying what? You guys with me or not? Everybody on the same page? Right, and that's very important to understand. And another very important misconception or debunking of a myth is that the planter class in the southern states, we guys know, was an elite class of people, i.e., all free white people in the South did not own slaves. A large number of white people in the South themselves were very poor and worked the fields themselves, by themselves, or with other slaves. But the big white house, the planter class, they were the millionaires. They were the elite, rich people of society. Had the best education, they had the most cultivated, most sophisticated ways. It's not the person drinking liquor, who's son of zina. This, you got the average poor person, right? And that's another thing with regards to, I'm going to hate all white people and love all black people. And that's a big problem. Because for sure there were black people who were involved in blacks being slaves. And there were white people who were involved with what?
Black people being free.
You get the point I'm trying to make? All right. Khairan inshallah. All right, so once more the hadith states, Hadith ibn Umar, or Abdullah ibn Umar, radiyallahu anhuma, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال جزاك الله خيرا الله يبارك فيكم من أعتق شركا له في عبد فكان له مال يبلغ ثمن العبد قوم العبد قيمة عدل فأعطى شركاءه حصصهم وعتق عليه وإلا فقد عتق منه ما عتق. يعني من أعتق، من حرر شركا يعني قسطا جزءا، لنقسم العبد إلى كم جزء؟ 3 أجزاء. من أعتق يعني من حرر، تحرير رقبة. من حرر، من أعتق يعني من حرر شركا يعني قسط جزء، له يعني من حقه من ماله هو، في عبد في مملوك، فكان لهذا المحرر الذي أراد اعتاق هذا العبد مال يكافي سائر الأجزاء، الجزئين الأخيرين. أنت معي ولا لا؟ الجزئين إيش؟ الباقيين. فهمتني؟ قوم العبد يعني كم قيمة هذا العبد؟ قام بهذا التقييم رجل عدل، رجل عاقل، رجل وسط، لا يظلم المالك ولا يظلم المملوك، ويزيد الأمر شدة وصعوبة. قال فأعطى هذا المحرر شركاءه حصصهم، أجزاءهم، أقساطهم، وعتق عليه يعني تحرر هذا العبد، وإلا إذا عجز عن هذا لم يكن عنده هذا المال فقد عتق يعني فقد تحرر من هذا العبد ما تحرر منه ثلث أو ربع أو نصف على حسب الشركاء. أنت معي ولا لا؟ على حسب إيش؟ طيب خيرا إن شاء الله تعالى. This is authentic, Mauritanian tea, This is from the. Tell us about this tea from Mauritania. خليفة حدثنا الشاهدين الكرام أن هذا الشاي موريتاني. Nice cup ما شاء الله. هذا تبع البر ولا شو؟ بري بحري شو؟ بدوي شو هو يعني؟
هو بدوي.
بدوي.
نعم
أصلي.
نعم.
طيب متى تشربون؟
نشرب بالصباح وبالمساء.
ما الأكل من دون؟
بالصبح وبالغداء وبالعشاء. 3 مرات.
كل 3 مرات.
نعم.
طيب الصبح الغداء
بعد الغداء.
بعد الغداء
نعم.
بعدين
العشاء.
وبعد العشاء.
كلهم 3.
عرفت. هذا بالسكر أم بدون؟
بالسكر. نعم. لا بالسكر.
شو في أعشاب ولا شو؟
في أعشاب. نعم.
في أعشاب.
هذه مصنوع بالصين
هذا.
بسم الله شوفوا.
هذا الشاي مصنوع بالصين.
شوفوا خليفة جيبوا جزاكم الله خير جيبوا.
شاي جميل.
ما
حط
يصير.
معاه النعناع عود جيد.
ومنت ها؟
النعناع.
So it's a green tea with mint. Many other countries have green tea with mint as well, such as Saudi. Saudi have green tea with mint or black tea, red tea. Algeria, etc., etc. Bismillah. Strong. It's good. It definitely puts some hair on your chest. That's a fact. Shakan, that may be above their pay grade to understand that terminology, huh? In the masjid, huh? Definitely will, huh? Allahu Akbar.
That's why it's in shot glass.
Clearly. Allahu Akbar. هل من مزيد؟ إن شاء الله. 3 مرات؟ بسم الله هذا الأول. طيب. Okay. جزاكم الله خيرا. Okay. So we understand the hadith, what it means. One man frees one part. He has to cover the remaining 2 or 3 or 4 parts. And if not, what takes place? It says, should let its price be estimated by a just man. A just man. No one who is going to wrong the slave and oppress him and keep him in bondage unnecessarily. And at the same time, he's going to oppress the people who have or are going to lose wealth. قيمة عدل, justice. فأعطى شركائه حصصهم. And give his partners the price of their shares. And make him into slave. End of discussion. And if that's not the case, otherwise, he manumits the slave partially. So the slave is not allowed to work, to go into debt, or whatever else to get the remaining parts of his manumission. Everyone understand this? Moving forward. An-Nawawi rahimahullah ta'ala says regarding this chapter, how much time we have?
8 minutes
To the end? Okay, we'll stop here. We'll start with the questions. And bi-idhnillahi ta'ala next week, we'll get further into the sharh. Wallahu ta'ala.